Hey, what's up everybody? I'm Jesse. This is my garage. Here's some project cars. And that's what we're talking about today is our 300ZX project car. And right now we are working on the rear suspension. So of course, the first thing I'm going to talk about is going to be a coilover system to put in place. That's going to be our number one. That's going to be on the front and on the back. I'm going to assume that you're going to be lowering your car is what we're going to be talking about, is the performance and all the suspension components when lowering your vehicle and how to maximize your alignment, tire wear, tire performance, grip, and fitment. If you don't necessarily want grip and you want some tilty wheels, we're going to be able to do that better with these aftermarket parts and get our fitment and alignment where you want it to be on your car. So while we're back there messing with the rear suspension, and this is really going to be up to you. You can hit me down in the comments section below and let me know what your skill level is for, a rear suspension refresh. Is it complete disassembly? Are we dropping the subframe? Are we just changing some arms? Do you think you might want to go into bushings? Hit me in the comments if you have any questions about any of that. I'm going to start to do like a little video where I take people's questions and I'll answer them. We'll put them in video form. But another part that we want to start to think about replacing is just all the little bushings. Now there's a lot of bushings in the rear suspension of this vehicle, of any vehicle. We have our axle that comes from the differential and goes to our wheel hubs in the back. Well, those wheel hubs are on a knuckle, and the knuckle is where it has all the tow arm, the traction arm, and the upper control arm, and each one of those has a bushing in its own. So that's 3 bushings on each knuckle and 6 total for the vehicle. So those aren't super bad. Those are another good entry level to start replacing bushings. They're an easier bushing to get out, and they're an easier bushing to replace as long as you're a patient, have the workspace to go ahead and complete that task. But if you're up to it, I would say replacing all those bushings. And you can, this is where, if you have a high-kiss and you want to do a high-kiss delete, you can delete that, because I think the tow arm on the high-kiss model is the high-kiss arm. I'm pretty, yeah, because that's going to steer the wheels. Yeah, tow arm same for the front. So if you're doing a high-kiss delete, you're going to delete that ball joint anyways. And if you're going to delete that ball joint, links in the description on deleting that ball joint, deleting your high-kiss, all that fun stuff. I've got them down there below, show you all the parts. We're going to replace that ball joint with a bushing and an arm anyway, so we need to replace that bushing. So if you're going to do that one, you might as well do the other 2. You're already right there, but that is going to involve taking, you're going to need to take the knuckle off of the axle. So disconnect that and then drop it from the lower control arm on that. So if your skill level is at that, I would highly suggest those. Now, the lower ball joint on your rear suspension actually holds up pretty well. It holds up pretty well, and they're tricky to find the replacement parts for because they're not listed a lot of places. I'm actually going to continue to run just the lower control arm with the ball joint on there. For one, the boot's not ripped, and for 2, it's still pretty stiff, which is, I'm actually kind of amazed by that. After 30 years, it's actually still in pretty good working order. But I don't want to dive into that lower control arm too much, because GK Tech offers an aftermarket lower control arm that if I want to spend any money on replacing that ball joint, I'm probably just going to buy those aftermarket lower control arms. They are on my 240SX, and they're pretty slick. They get rid of all the bushings. They go to Heim joints and get rid of any suspension bind you might have, and they're also adjustable like crazy. I'm not really going to mess with the lower control arm, but we are going to replace all of our upper control arms, our high-kiss. I don't really have high-kiss on this car actually, but if you have a twin turbo model, you might have high-kiss and you might want to delete it. If you do, that's a good chance to start adjusting and putting in new bushings right there. So while you're back there with your knuckle and your wheel hub and all that stuff, you want to check your wheel hubs to see if there's any play in the bearing, because what you don't want to do is do all this stuff, a worn out wheel bearing back there that's going to excessive play, and you'll be able to see that. You can literally, while everything's bolted together, grab the hub of the wheel. Let me grab one. This is a 90s non-turbo that is hence it's missing a little flange there, but this is extra part. So this one's actually good. But you'll be able to grab this, and if you can move it at all and you can feel like just any type of movement back and forth, of course it's going to move around like this and it's going to be smooth. So you want to, you know, this is smooth. You don't want any binding here. It's going to be a little tight because there's, you know, lubes and bearings all in there. But if we can rock this from side to side and you can hear a little clicking, let me go grab a bad one real quick. All right, so this one is bad. This is my bad one. And maybe you can see, but I'm going side to side, and hopefully you can see that it is moving a ton. There should be no movement. It should be very solid. And even the rotating, this is very free spinning. And then that, and you can hear ever so slightly, it makes like a noise when you go back and forth. Now on these, there's two ways to do this. You can get a new bearing right here. But if you get a new bearing right here, you have to press this out, which is right inside here. This will have to be pressed out. Then it'll have to be pressed back on because the bearing is this housing right here. And this is the wheel hub. Or, which I'll probably be, depending on your skill level and the tools that you have at your disposal, you might be able to talk to a machine shop and they might be able to push that out. You might be able to talk to somebody and have them push it out and charge you a nominal fee to push those back together. If you don't have that option, they do have the option where you can buy this assembly complete with a new wheel hub and with a new wheel bearing. You're probably going to drop like, I feel it's like $200. I'll put some links in the description below on all that stuff. I'll definitely have some links in the description, but that's one thing. We're not going to tear apart all of our suspension and not check our wheel bearings. And you can check this, and with the tire on, if you just have your car jacked up on the back, if one is questionable, if you're like, this is off the driver's side on mine, it was very apparent. But if you hadn't experienced something like that before and it was questionable and you had a lot of movement, and then you can go over to the passenger side and we have the same amount of movement, and you can use those comparison to each other. They might go bad at the same time. They might not. The one on our passenger side, totally fine. The one on the driver's side, totally smoked. So you can be able to compare those back and forth. It's nice when you have something to compare it to, especially like if you're doing the e-brake system on this car. If you've ever done drum brakes before, you know, do you do one side at a time? Because you got to remember how all that goes back together and exactly how the spring sits. So tip on doing drum brakes. And this car has the drum e-brake, so you'll probably get in there at some point. And if you are tearing it down, like down to that far, you're gonna have to take apart that drum brake. So do one side at a time and compare the sides together to make sure that either it's bad or, you know, put it back together correctly. So another suspension component that we can look at if we're just gonna start to overhaul our whole rear suspension and we want to start tightening everything up, replacing broken and cracked stuff, I can almost guarantee that your differential bushings are wore out. And if you watched one of my other videos the other day, it was like a vlog video when we were taking all the bushings out of the subframe. I did the differential at the same time, and I smacked it with one of the bushings with a hammer, and it came right out. So that tells me that it was broken all the way around. They definitely shouldn't do that. So our differential bushings, now 2 of them go into the back of the subframe, and 2 of them bolt up to the subframe. So they both go to the subframe, but 2 are more pressed into the differential itself, and then 2 are pushed into the back of the subframe. You can drop the whole differential and get to all that stuff and replace all that without having to drop the subframe, but that stuff will stiffen it all up. I did go ahead and get GK Tech solid aluminum bushings for our differential. It will transfer some of the vibration, but it will also, we're using polyurethane bushings at the subframe, so hopefully that will dampen some of that vibration out. All right, well, that brings me to the last thing on this list of rear suspension components that you should be thinking about when refreshing your suspension on your 30-year-old 300ZX, and that is our rear subframe bushings. Now, if you watched another video, we just talked about different types of rear subframe bushings, and kind of like I did a little review on the GK Tech subframe bushings, and then compared them to Energy Suspension and Z1. And this is a pretty extensive replacement procedure for your rear subframe bushings. And you have to drop the whole rear subframe out of the car. You have to get the bushings out of there, which is a whole job in itself. And you have to tear everything apart to do that, and then put it all back together and put it back up in the car. You're definitely going to need help if you're going to tackle that project on your own. If you are new to modifying your car or doing maintenance, I would highly suggest not taking that project on first. Find somebody that could help you out with this and has some kind of, but one option, if you can't take out the subframe bushings right now, because your car is going to be down for a minute too, is the slip-in collars. Now that can help you on a couple different levels. It'll help with the wheel hop. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. As always, if you got any value out of this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more stuff like this, project cars, everything that we got going on this channel, hit that subscribe button so you can make sure you don't miss anything. You want to be a part of the garage, go over to Patreon and help support us, kick down a couple bucks, and I will send you out a sticker myself, retro JDM style. Go over to my Instagram page at Build Theory, drop a follow on that, and keep up to what's going on in the garage and what's going on with all these projects. And until then, I will see you next time.